Masechet Nedarim Daf Tet Zayin at the Mishnah. We're now going to introduce a series of examples regarding a Shevuah, parallel to the previous Mishnah, which had these same examples in the context of a Neder. So if a person says, Shevuah she'eni yashen, she'eni medaber, she'eni mehalech asur, someone makes a language of a Shevuah and prohibits himself, that says, I'm not going to sleep, or I will not speak, or I will not walk. Those are valid shivuot, and the person may not do that. This is different from a neder because while a neder you cannot make on an action, a neder has to be on an object, and so the Talmud before had to explain these are only d'Rabbanan. Or he says it regarding the object of his eye, that my eye will not have any sleep. But for a Shevuah, that's perfectly fine, because Shevuah goes on the person, an action that I will do or will not do. Any of those are totally valid Shevuot, so these would be perfectly legitimate deoraita obligations, not to sleep, not to speak, and not to walk. Now, the next set of formulas are ambiguous. Our korban lo ochal lecha. Ha korban she'ochal lecha. Lo korban lo ochal lecha mutar. These three examples are all permitted. They do not make a binding, not a shivuah and not a neder. The reason why they do not make a binding shivuah is because it doesn't have a language of a shivuah. A shivuah has to be made in God's name or something that references God's name, like the names that are referred to in the Torah, as we saw. But the word korban is not one of them. That does not make a shivuah. This is a language of a neder. A neder means if something will be prohibited like a korban. But there's a problem with each of these formulas. If I say korban, by which he means like a korban, prohibited like a korban, that which I will not eat from you. Well, that's fine. What I don't eat of yours will be prohibited, but what I do eat is totally fine. So that doesn't create a prohibition. If he says ha korban she'ochal lecha, the korban or this korban of what from what I will eat from you, then this language is understood to be by the life of the korban that I will eat of yours. But that does not make a binding shivuah. You have to say either like a korban or just korban. But if you say ha korban as two words, we saw earlier that just means by the life of the korban and does not effectuate anything. And if he says lo korban lo ochal lecha, not what I do not eat from you will not be a korban. So that just means that what I do not eat from you will be permitted because it's not a korban. But we are not going to make an inference from here that what I do eat from you will be a korban. As we're going to see, this would be the opinion of Rabbi Meir, who does not infer a positive from a negative. All right, that's the Mishnah. And now let's analyze. Mani matnitin. Who would be the author of our Mishnah? Rabbi Meir here. It's got to be Rabbi Meir. Te'i Rabbi Yehuda la shane le korban ve'la shane le ha korban. If it was Rabbi Yehuda only says that a vow is binding. If you say ke korban, you have to say this bread will be like a korban. But if you say ha korban or just korban, or ha korban is two words or one word, Rabbi Yehuda makes no distinction between any of those. And so this second line where he says ha korban, that of what I eat from you, that is not good. It sounds like if he left off the ha and just said korban she'ochal lecha, right, prohibited to me is what I will eat from you, well then that would be a binding vow. And that's true according to Rabbi Meir. It's not true according to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says with or without the ha, it would still not be good. So we can infer from here that the author is not Rabbi Yehuda. Is Rabbi Meir. Hold on. Ema sefa la korban lo ochal lecha mutar. In the sefa it says la korban. Now in our text it says lo korban as two words. Here it's being cited as la korban as one word, and this does make a difference. But we have to remember that this was transmitted orally, in which you can't see if it's one word or two words. It sounds the same. Okay, so we will clarify this in a second. But right now we're assuming that the Mishnah says as one word, la korban lo ochal lecha, and that is permitted because that just means what I do not eat from you will be a korban. And we asked, V'hatanan lekorban lo ochal lecha, Rabbi Meir oser. And this is a contradiction to another Mishnah that says the same phrase, lekorban, I will not eat from you. And Rabbi Meir says prohibited. So which one is it? Permitted or prohibited? Ve'amar Rabbi Abba na'asa ke'omer lekorban yehe lefichach lo ochal lecha. Regarding that Mishnah on 13a, Rabbi Abba explained why Rabbi Meir prohibits. It says, because you parse it into two phrases. Lekorban, as a sacrifice, meaning this food that you're giving me is like a sacrifice to me. Therefore, I will not eat it. So since we parse into two phrases, that creates a prohibition. But here, in our Mishnah, it says lekorban lo achal lecha, the exact same phrase, and it says permitted. So which one is it? That 13a is a Meir. It sounds like this one is not a Meir, but from the previous law, it sounds like it is a Meir. So we're really confused here. And we answer, La kashya hadamar le korban, hadamar lo korban, de lo have korban ka'amar. So there is no difficulty. That Mishnah on 13a is when he says le korban as one word, as a korban, the food that you give me, therefore I'm not going to eat it. That makes sense. Whereas our Mishnah, he says two words, not korban, and that would mean it will not be a korban. And therefore, since he says the phrase will not be a korban, that which I eat from you, that means it's not prohibited, so it is permitted, and that is therefore permitted, and we do not infer the negative from the positive. And so now we resolve the entire Mishnah can in fact be the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Next Mishnah, Shevuah lo ochal lecha. Ha shevuah sheochal lecha, lo shevuah lo ochal lecha asur. These three formulas create a binding shevuah. Makes a shevuah that I will not eat of yours. He makes so that makes sense, a shevuah, that I will not eat of anything that you have. But also the opposite. Ha shevuah she'ochal lecha, shevuah of what I will eat from you. Well, that also makes a prohibition. I guess the idea is that a shevuah on what I will eat from you, so I'm prohibited from eating that which I otherwise would eat from you. Okay, even though it's opposite language, there still makes a prohibition. And also if he says, not a shevuah of what I will not eat from you, so here we are inferring a positive from a negative. If there is no shevuah on what I will not eat from you, then there is a shevuah on what I will eat from you. Okay, can this be also to be Meir? Maybe it's a different author. Maybe to be Meir would distinguish between a neder and a shevuah. All right. Now the Gemara is going to ask about this, the first two phrases. So we see, according to the second phrase, the fact that it's included, that means that if one says a shevuah of what I will eat from you, the meaning is that I will not eat. Right? A swear about that which I will eat from you, means a swear that I will not eat from you. Okay, that's what we can see from the second phrase here. Hold on. Urminhu shevuot shetaim shehen arba. Now we're going to quote a contradiction from a Mishnah in Masechet Shevuot. Also has a lot of the laws of Shevuot, so we're going to compare it. And there it says there are two types of Shevuot that are actually doubled as four. So there's two different ways of categorizing Shavuot, and altogether that would be four permutations. Here are the four. She'ochal v'she'lo ochal, she'achalti v'she'lo achalti. And one can make a swear, this is all the Mishnah there, I will eat or I will not eat, I did eat or I did not eat. So the two ways of categorizing are future and past. One can make a Shavuot on something that he will or will not do in the future, or he can make a Shavuot on history, promising that I did eat or I didn't eat. He can also categorize them as positive or negative, so that makes the different four. Now, midika'amar she'lo ochal she'achalti ve'she'lo achalti mekelal de she'ochal lecha de'achelna mashma. From the fact that it separates these four different languages, it sounds like there is a parallel between each of them. And since it says that I will not eat, that I ate, that I did not eat. Clearly, the ones in the past are opposites. Either if I say I did not eat, then it has to be true that I did not eat. Achalti means I did eat. So too for the future ones. If I say she'ochal lecha, that I will eat, that means that I am promising that I am going to eat, because it's the opposite of she'lo ochal, right? And so therefore, this, according to that Mishnah, she'ochal lecha means I will eat, whereas according to our Mishnah over here, Shavua she'ochal lecha means I will not eat. Well, how could the same phrase mean opposite things? There's a contradiction between these two Mishnayot. We have a couple of answers. Amar Abaye. She'ochal shete leshonot mashma. Abaye says, yes, it is in fact ambiguous, and it can mean both things. Depends on the context. Hayu misarevin bo le'echol ve'amar achilna, achilna. Let's say you're passing by and your friend comes out and he's pressing you to come and eat. Come inside, right? Come, fadal, come eat with us. And the person, the guest says, I'm going to eat, right? Yeah, I'm going to come. Vetu shivua she'ochal. Finally, he's pressing so much until the guest says, I promise that I will eat, right? I will come at some point and eat your food, right? I'm going to have something. So de'achilna mashma, in that context, it means that he is making a swear that he will eat. So that explains why in Mishnah Shavuot it means in fact that he promises that he will eat. Aval amar lo achilna vetu amar Shavuah she'ochal dala achilna kamar. But if a person, the guest is over and he doesn't want to eat, and the host is saying, come eat. And the guest says, no, I'm not eating anything. I refuse. I am not eating anything. And then he has to make a final declarative statement. I'm making a swear that I will not eat anything. So in that case, if he says Shavua she'ochal, obviously he means that I'm not going to eat. You can tell on the context what he was saying beforehand. That's what he means. But in fact, that phrase Shavua she'ochal can mean a swear that I will eat, or a swear from that which I will, a swear from eating, a swear that I will eat, or a swear that from eating, and that means that he will not eat. Okay, that's Abaye. You have to look at the context, and then you'll know what he means. Rav Ashe Amar, she'ochal dishvuah, she'iochal ka'amar. Rav Ashe says, no, it's not that. It's the person, when it says in the Mishnah that he says she'ochal, actually he said something that sounds like she'i ochal. You could see how if a person doesn't pronounce his words so perfectly, she'ochal could sound like she'ochal. And then maybe that's two words, she'i ochal, which means I will not eat. So Rav Ashe says that the Mishnah is talking about a case where he enunciated something that actually sounds like he's not going to eat. All right, in Ken Peshita, wait a second. If he actually said she'i ochal of Shavuah, that I will not eat, well then that's obvious that he creates a binding prohibition. He said, I swear that I'm not going to eat. So why would I have to even say that in the Mishnah? What's the chidush? Oh, because I might have thought maybe he is just not pronouncing himself properly. He blundered, he stuttered, and so he said she'yochal, and what he meant to say is she'ochal, and he just mispronounced she'ochal and make it sound she'i ochal. And I might have thought that since he didn't pronounce it quite correctly and it sounded like she'ochal, then he would not make a prohibition. So kamash malan, that we follow the meaning of the pronunciation. And since he pronounced it she'i ochal and it sounds enough like she'i ochal, that too is considered a prohibition. All right, so that's Abaye's answer and Rav Ashe's answer. How come they disagree with each other? Abaye lo amar ta'am ke Rav Ashe, de lo katane she'i ochal. Abaye doesn't like Rav Ashe's answer because it doesn't say in the Mishnah that I will not eat. It says she'ochal. It says clearly what he said, she'ochal. It doesn't say he mispronounced the word. He added some letters in it. Certainly not that he added a whole sentence, a whole word. So Abaye doesn't like the way Rav Ashe is inserting those letters. And Rav Ashi also does not agree with the reason for Abaye. This is interesting. He says nadeh, like nida, to keep away. He keeps away from the reason of Abaye. This is unusual phrase. This is probably another phrase that is particular to Masechet Nedarim, that has this different vocabulary from most. Even over here, this is the usual vocabulary. Abaye did not say tam ke Rav Ashi, but here Rav Ashi moved away from the reasoning of Abaye. Why? Kasavad shelo ochal nami mashma shete leshonot. Because according to Rav Ashi, even if he says, I will not eat Shevuah of Shevuah that I will not eat from you, that also is just as ambiguous as Shevuah she'ochal. For example, hayu mesarvin bo le'echol ve'amar la'achelna Avamar name Shevuah ben she'ochal ben she'lo ochal haden achelna mashma da'amar. For example, if the host was pushing the guest to eat, and the guest says, am I not going to eat? Am I not going to eat? Rhetorically, right? Of course I'm going to eat, right? Just give me a minute. And V'amar name, and then he said a Shevuah. In that case, whether he said ben ochal, in that case it's clear. If he says Shevuah, I'm going to eat, clearly means he's going to eat. Or ben shelo achal, or if he said I'm not going to eat, he means it rhetorically, as he did in the context. I make a vow, am I not going to eat? So then it means that he is going to eat. Haden achilna mashma de'amar. So it does in fact mean, it's also ambiguous. And that could mean that he can eat. And also the other way. And if someone says a shivu'ah that I will not eat, then it could also mean that they're not going to eat. That would be just a straightforward statement. And so therefore, a shivu'ah that I'm not going to eat is just as ambiguous as a shivu'ah that I am going to eat. And our Mishnah did not include examples of both ways, according to you, that it's saying this because it's ambiguous, and using that to resolve the contradiction between Mishnah Shavuot and Mishnah here, because it could mean yes, Shavuah Shochal could mean a positive or a negative. Well, then it should also include in our Mishnah here Shelo Ochal, because that is also ambiguous, and it doesn't. Ela Tana Pisakah She'ochal de'acherna mashma v'shelo ochal lo ochal mashma. Rather, the Tana made it very clear. This is the one in Shavuot that She'ochal, that I will eat, means that I will eat. And if I make a vow that I will not eat, that only means I will not eat. And that's why Rav Ashi prefers his answer, that here in our Mishnah, where the problem is that he said it in a way that sounds like she'i ochal, and that's the reason why when he says shevuah she'ochal lecha, because it sounds like he said she'i ochal lecha, that is the reason for the prohibition. All right, that concludes that Mishnah, and then we go to the next one, a Mishnah that we've already made some reference to. Ze chomer b'shevuot mi b'nedarim, period. That which is we referred to above, is how a Shevuah is more stringent than a Neder. The Gemara will clarify what halacha above this applies to. But then, V'chomer b'nedarim imbi b'shevuot. On the other hand, there is a stringency in Nedarim that is greater than Shevuot, cases where a Neder will apply and a Shevuah will not apply. Kesad Amar konam sukkah shani ose lulav shani notel tefillin shani meniach b'nedarim asur b'shavuot mutar she'en nishba'in lavor ala misvot. If he says konam, which means like a korban, this sukkah that I will do it, doesn't mean make it here. It means that I will perform the mitzvah, that I will enter this sukkah. He says as a neder, this sukkah is prohibited to me as a korban. That makes a prohibition. He can't go in that sukkah. Or any sukkah. If he says any sukkah prohibited to me, no good. Lulav shani notel, I am a lulav that I will take is prohibited to me like a korban. Then he cannot take a lulav. Or tefillin that I will put on is prohibited to me like a korban. In all these cases, he's prohibited from doing these mitzvot. And it does apply. The reason is because, while you can't make yourself prohibited to do a mitzvah, but here the prohibition is on the item. He's just saying this item is prohibited to me, and therefore it works. Whereas if he says it in the language of Shevuah, I will not go into a sukkah, I will not take lulav, I will not put on tefillin, that does not work, because a person is already obligated from the Torah to do all these three things, and therefore he has no right, no ability to take upon himself a prohibition to do these very things that he's commanded to do. Good. Now, we ask on that first line, Homer miklal de neder hu veha mutar katane. Is there really a stringency here of a shivua over a neder? That would imply that there is even an existence of a neder, or even in potential. But here it just says mutar. In other words, if that's just like, is it really a shivua over a neder? If you look at the clause here, the immediately previously clause of this statement, well, that was about this korban lo ochal lach, and that we said is mutar and does not create a shivua, nor does it create a neder. So there is no neder, there is no shivua. So you can't say about this that this is a stringency of a shivua over a neder. It doesn't have anything. Rather, here's what we mean. Asefa de'idach ba'bakatane shivua she'eni yashen she'eni medaber she'eni mahalech asur ze chomer b'shivot ba'nedarim. Now rather it's going on the last clause of the previous section. Although we started off our daf today with this phrase, actually, if you look beforehand, this the Gemara is now considering this to be the end of the previous Mishnah. And there, if someone makes a neder that he's not going to sleep, it actually does not apply, because that's about an action, not about a thing. And so that would apply only midrabanan, as Ravina explained, or we have to change the formulation. So therefore, that neder does not apply because it's about an action. Whereas if it's a shivuah, then that does apply, asur mideoraita. So that's what we're talking about here in our Mishnah when it says the previous example was where shivuah is more inclusive than a neder. Good. Next. Right, Sefa Dida Baba Ketani, which says, Shivadeni Yashen, Sheni Medaber, Sheni Mehalech, Asur, Zechomer Bashivuot, Min Bad Nedarim. It was referring to those three items where a Shivuah on an action, it does apply, but a Neder on an action does not apply. Okay, Chomer Ben Nedarim Beshivuot Kesad. Okay, now regarding the rest of the Mishnah that shows that a Neder can be effective on the object of a mitzvah, whereas a Shivuah does not, cannot apply on the action of a mitzvah. Rav Kahana Matne Amar Rav Gidel Amar Rav. V'Rav Tivyomi Matne Amar Rav Gidel Amar Shemuel. There's two versions of who said the following statement. Both versions, Rav Gidel says it. Question, did he say in the name of Rav or did he say in the name of Shemuel? What's the source that you cannot make a shivuah to violate a commandment? Tamudomar lo yachel devaro. Devaro lo yachel aval mechel hu lechefse shamayim. Because the pasuk says, his word shall not be profaned. That means my own word. If I say I'm not going to eat, I'm going to exercise, so that's just my word. It's not a commandment. And that word is binding and I cannot profane it. But if it's chefsef shamayim, if it's something to do a mitzvah or to violate a mitzvah, well then that I can profane my word. If I went against a mitzvah, then my word should be profaned. I should not do the vow. I should do the mitzvah. That's where we learned it from. Okay, hold on. Neder, dichtiv ish kidor neder laHashem lo yachel debaro. You're quoting the very same pasuk says. Here's the pasuk in context. Ish kidor neder laHashem o hishaba shivuah le'esod yisal nafsho lo yachel debaro. So the very same pasuk includes both neder and shivuah. So if you're going to learn from the words lo yachel debaro that only his words cannot be profaned, but that of shamayim, if I make something against the mitzvah, can be profaned, and that applies to shivuah, well then apply it to a neder also, because it's in the very same pasuk. So therefore we suggest a new answer. Amar Abaye. Hada amar hana'at sukkah alai, hada amar shivuah shelo ehene min hasukkah. The difference is in the language. If a person, so it's not based on a pasuk, but rather it's based on the language. If a person says the benefit of a sukkah is prohibited to me, that works because the object is the sukkah. Whereas if a person says in a language of a shivuah, I will not benefit from the sukkah, then the object is on him, and so he cannot take an obligation upon himself that's against the Torah, but he can impose a prohibition on an object, even though that will result in a problem of performing the mitzvah. Okay, this is built into the nature of neder and shivuah. Amar Rava, v'chi misvot lehanot nitenu. Rava takes objection to the fact that Abaye added in the word hana'ah, the benefit of a mitzvah. And he says a really important principle that has many ramifications. He says mitzvot, are they given for pleasure, for benefit? They're not. We perform mitzvot because they were commanded. Hashem said so, so we do it. And it's not so that we will have enjoyment from them, we'll have reward from them, that it makes us happy, fulfilled. Those are nice things, but that's not why they were given. And so if you say that the benefit, the happiness, the joy of Sukkah should be prohibited to me, well, then that would be perfectly fine to go in the Sukkah anyway, because the purpose of the mitzvah is simply to fulfill it and not to get benefit from it. So therefore, the benefit is just secondary, is a side point, and one can this vow, this neder would not even work. Ela amar Rava, hada amar yeshivat sukkah alai, v'hada amar shivuah shelo eshe basukah. So Rava just modifies the language. He agrees in principle with Abaye, whether it's the object or the action. And so if you said the sitting of a sukkah is prohibited to me, well then that's the object of the sukkah. The sukkah is prohibited that for me to sit in. That is a binding neder. Whereas if he makes a shivuah, I will not sit in the sukkah, then that doesn't work because he already has an obligation to sit in the sukkah. He cannot take upon himself an opposite obligation. All right. Abaye and Rava just showed why we can, in fact, use this pasuk to teach that you cannot make a shivuah regarding a mitzvah, because even though the pasuk says neder and shivuah, but there's a fundamental difference between the nature of a neder and the nature of a shivuah. So only a shivuah is where we apply that you should not profane your words, but you can profane words about a mitzvah, because that is going on you, on the person, and so you should profane your words if you obligate yourself against the mitzvah. But the neder, since it does not apply to the person, but rather to an object, so therefore it will apply even if the object happens to be an object of a mitzvah. And so this, in fact, is the source for the law that a shivuah does not apply to a commandment. And now we ask a question. Hold on, are you going to really learn it from that pasuk? And Bemidbar, we have another pasuk from which we can learn the very same thing. Why would we need two? Let's say someone takes an oath to nullify mitzvah. He says, I'm not going to put on tefillin. And let's say he does not nullify it, meaning he puts on tefillin against his oath. Can it be that he's going to be liable for violating his oath because he did a mitzvah? Talmud Omar lehara or lehetiv. Different pasuk in Vayikra. If a person makes a swear lehara, for bad or for good, for negative or for positive. Now we're going to compare the negative to the positive. Ma tava reshut afara'a reshut. Just like doing something for good is something that you can decide to. It's an optional action that you didn't have to do, but you decide to do it, and so that is something that is non-obligatory. So too hara'ah, so too preventing yourself from doing something and doing something wrong also has to be referring to something that is totally permitted, totally optional. Like I say, I'm not going to eat. So just like a positive vow is something that is not is something is about something that is totally voluntary, so too the negative has to be something voluntary, a voluntary action that I didn't otherwise have to do or not have to do were it not for the vow. And this excludes someone who makes a swear to not do a mitzvah, and then he fulfilled the mitzvah, that this swear would not take effect because this is not a voluntary action. If he makes a vow that he's not going to put on a shevuah, that I'm not going to put on tefillin, and then that's not a voluntary action because actually I have to put on tefillin. So that lehara, that negative vow that says I'm not going to do that, will not apply because it's not a voluntary action. It's something that's already commanded. So here we have another pasuk in Vayikra from which we can learn the very same principle that a shevuah will not apply to a commandment. So why do I need two? And the final answer is chad kera lemiftereh mikorban shevuah vechad lemiftereh min lav de shevuah. I do need both of them because one of the pisukim, I need to tell me that I do not have to bring a korban that I would normally bring if I violate a shevuah. If I made a shevuah regarding a command not to do a commandment, and then I did the commandment, I don't have to bring the korban. But maybe there's still a prohibition. So I need the other pasuk to tell me, no, there's not even any prohibition at all. That shevuah does not take effect, and I actually should violate the swear and fulfill the mitzvah because the swear never applied in the first place. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.